Welcome back to Enthusiastically Optimistic. In this episode, we focus on the top 5 reasons Man of Steel is not as bad as you think. Let's get into it. Number 5, Man of Steel was the 2013 reintroduction of the classic Superman origin story. It's problematic, but it's not the problem. What I mean by that is that I think a lot of what the flack that the Snyder version of Superman gets isn't so much based on Man of Steel. It started there, don't get me wrong. But a lot of it is what Superman became afterward in Batman versus Superman and the Justice League storyline. I think that version is more so what people think about, but they go all the way back and blame Man of Steel for it. Now, Man of Steel had its issues. In my opinion, there are three primary issues with Man of Steel. Things that I think are fundamentally problematic, but they don't ruin the overall story. We'll go ahead and get those things out of the way. Number one, I think his parents were an issue. So I understand this is a much more realistic version, a grounded version of Superman. What that also means is that he's not going to have the perfect parents. I get all that. But the idea of Jonathan Kent telling Clark, maybe he should let the kids die. I understand the idea is that we have a Jonathan Kent that doesn't have all the answers. He's not some sage, all wise father figure. He's simply a simple man trying to figure out how to raise his son in a hateful world. I get all that. I still think it's fundamentally problematic to have parents like that for Superman. I think the mom is a little bit better. Martha's a little bit better because there's a beautiful scene in the movie in which Clark, his powers are coming in at school. He's overstimulated, oversensitive to what's going on around him. But his mom comes to the school and talks him through it, and it's a really really well done scene. But I think the dad part, and then Jonathan Kent, obviously his death. No matter how many times I've rewatched this movie, I cannot justify that scene. I understand the idea is that the secret is so important. He's willing to sacrifice himself for for Clark. And so he tells Clark, don't come save me. The tornado comes and kills him. I think that's fundamentally the dumbest possible choice ever in a storytelling of this retelling of Superman. I get the lessons not the same as in previous versions. When Jonathan Kent dies in the 78 Superman, the idea is that death is outside of what you can control, Clark. There's a beautiful line which he says, all these things I can do, all these powers, and I couldn't even save him. That is a part of his growth as Superman. In this movie, in Man of Steel, him, letting his dad talk him into not saving him, it just means that the secret is so important it shouldn't, he's not supposed to let it out. But he still becomes Superman anyway later on in the film. People still know the majority of Smallville knows that Clark Kent is Superman. They knew there was this big secret anyway. It's like the sacrifice doesn't make any sense. And the way it's set up, just from a writing standpoint, the way it's set up, Clark, the whole family is safe. Jonathan goes back for the dog. So he dies for the dog. Clark could have, and Clark volunteers to go. He said, no, no, I'll go. Why? It's like, from a storytelling perspective, I guess I kind of figure out what they were trying to do with it. It just is problematic at best, in my opinion. It's not a good scene in terms of it doesn't make me feel the weight of it just feels like it was a unnecessary death for the sake of dramatic effect. Third problem, the problematic issue with the movie, I think it's the neck snap of Zod in the movie. I know you have people who defend it all, will defend it all day long and say, "Oh my goodness, it makes so much sense. We need to see, why would Superman have a no kill rule?" And then, but he has no reason for that rule. He needs to have kill someone to have that rule. I don't buy it. Why? Because what's the ramifications of that moment in the movie? Yes, Henry Cavill does a phenomenal job acting, and then after he has this horrific scream that he has, well done. The next scene is much more lighthearted when he talks to the general and knocks down the satellite. But then in subsequent films, we never see ramifications from that moment in terms of his view of life now. His view of life, that life is sacred somehow. Nothing's changed. So then why was this moment so significant? Additionally, in terms of realism, like, oh, it's only realistic that had to happen. Well, let's look at it. How many Kryptonians were there that were attacking, or how many Kryptonians were there in this invasion? It was more than just three. Yet he only faces three of them in one-on-one confrontations. And then on top of that, he only faces two earlier on in the film at the same time. If he's that problematic, why not just send a few more Kryptonians out there to fight him? I mean, maybe they weren't all as powerful as he was, but look at Feora. She showed up and kicked his butt basically at the very beginning. And she's not fully power, doesn't have her access to her full powers yet. Zod also fought him, not fully powered. So if he sent out maybe five Kryptonians, they could have taken him out pretty easily in this film. So the idea of realism being that he only fought Zod, that don't it doesn't really fly in terms of my viewpoint. So I think it's problematic that they wrote in a way that he had to fight Zod one on one. I don't mind the fight one on one honestly, but the idea that he had to kill him, that's not necessarily more realistic because the Phantom Zone just happens to suck everyone into it except for Zod. Again, it was written that way to justify the next snap. I'm not again problematic for me. Problematic. It wasn't great because I think a movie at its core, no matter how good it is, moving all the way through, we remember the ending parts last. Like whatever happens last sets the tone for how we remember that movie. I think ending on that tone was a dour note to end the movie on. And so looking back, I know when I first saw the movie, it was shocking and it was upsetting. And so I didn't have a great feeling watching the film the first time around. Many years later, I just revisited it a few months ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed the film. Now I can look back and, oh my goodness, see it for a well done film, a well done version of Superman. But those three things are still very problematic for me. Number four, okay, this was a real world version of Superman. So I see the comparisons between the new film 2025 and Man of Steel, and a lot of people are dismissing it and just dissing Man of Steel. I don't think that's right because these are two very, very different approaches to Superman. Let me explain. For this new version of Superman, I love it. It's we are immersed in this fantastical world that Superman lives. There's other superheroes, there's metahumans. It's not our world. It's not the real world. It's supposed to be a fantastical version of reality. That's fantastic. It's love. We love it. On the other hand, Man of Steel is essentially a first contact alien invasion story through the lens of Superman. It is what would the real world be like if Superman was introduced to it? That's a totally different approach. So it's going to have a totally different style too. It's going to feel completely different. So the more grounded tone makes sense for a movie that's basically saying this is the real world as we know it, and then this extraordinary element is introduced to it, i.e., Kryptonians, specifically Superman. So the real world version, it makes sense why that movie has the tone that it has. Number three, Krypton. So in my personal opinion, I love this reinvention of Krypton that we see in the Man of Steel. It's this movie is very sci-fi heavy, like it feels like a science fiction movie. And so introducing this in the movie to Krypton, this version of Krypton is not an icy cold planet. It's not, ripped from the 1978 film or reinvention of that version of Krypton. We've seen that enough. Even Smallville borrowed, I think, heavily from that version. We've seen it a lot. We don't need to revisit that version anymore. This version it pulls some from the Man of Steel comic book. That version of Krypton is much colder, not in terms of physical temperature, but a colder society. But it makes sense in contrast that with humans. And specifically Jor-El and Laura and their choice to have a natural born child as opposed to being born in like the matrices or the more artificial way children are conceived in this version of Krypton. So it makes sense why Clark would be unique. But it's just really interesting. Honestly, it's just an interesting take. It's visually a visual spectacle. It's a beautiful version of this sci-fi, utilitarian society. And then that's also brought to when we see Superman on Earth is between his costume, the what I consider the Fortress of Solitude, the different alien technology we see. It really feels authentic. It feels fully appropriate for a real world version of Superman. Number two, Clark has a fantastic character arc in Man of Steel. This is also why I feel like it's not the problem with the way people view Snyder's interpretation of Superman. Again, problematic in the elements I mentioned earlier, but just follow me if you will. So we start out with a Clark that is very much searching for identity. He is alienated, he's isolated, he feels alone in this world. He's always stood out as different and never really found his place. So he's searching for his purpose, but he's also searching for answers to who he is as a person. Who is he? Where does he come from? All those things. He knows he's different. He knows he's powerful. He doesn't know why. So it's a very authentic approach to Clark Kent slash Superman that we've not really seen before. Granted, we've seen elements of it. For example, the character that in the Christopher Reeve film, the character Jeff East, he plays the difference is he at 18 leaves, is drawn to the fortress, sets up the Fortress of Solitude, and lives for the next 12 years there. Well, imagine if there's not a crystal telling you where to go. Imagine if you, as Clark, the same character that Jeff East plays in Superman, the 78 movie, you know you need to leave home. You know you need to go and search out and figure out your purpose, but there's no roadmap. You don't know where you're going, but you know you're still looking out there. You're looking for something. You're looking for answers. That's what Man of Steel gives us. That version of Clark Kent that doesn't have the answers outlined for him, but he has to go searching for them himself. It's also very similar to a comic book, Superman Birthright. Very different tone. I think Birthright has a much more positive and brighter tone in terms of Clark's character. He's much more well adjusted, I feel like, even though it still feels isolated. This version, it makes sense why he's kind of stoic in terms of he's more of a silent character. Guess what? He's isolated, he doesn't have lots of close friends. It makes sense for him. But as we see in the film, as he gets closer and closer to discovering things, I love that the perspective shifts from a little bit of Clark, and then we get Lois's perspective. He becomes a background character when she lands in the Arctic, when they're investigating this phenomenon in the Arctic Circle. And then from her perspective, she sees this guy walking up, entering. It's like, wait, what's happening? But this shift in perspective is really interesting in the film. Then when Clark gets his answers, first of all, he saves Lois, but then he gets his answers. Um, he puts on the costume for the first time. It is a majestic scene, epic scene, totally. His first time flying. It's both funny, it's uh, inspirational even, and the fact that he smiles for the first time. We haven't seen him smile in the entire movie until that point in time. Why? Because he knows who he is now. He knows why he's here. There's a point to why he exists. Like it's really really well done. And then so you have the beautiful flying scene, which is great, and then he excitedly returns home to his mom.
I found him.
Who?
My parents. My people. I know where I come from now.
There's excitement in his voice. He knows who he is. He knows what he's supposed to do. That is really, really well done. Then, of course, they turn on the news and there's this alien invasion that's happening. Okay, that part aside, Clark has a clear character arc. He goes from silent and isolated to joyful when he finds his purpose. And then now, as he fulfills his purpose, we don't get. I think a great part would have been to see him saving the day before the alien invasion starts. I think that would have helped. I personally feel in cementing him as to see the joy of being Superman. We don't really get to see it. The next time we see him as Superman, he's turned himself into the army. And so again, the movie still plays out really well. I think the rest of him, he's not dark and stoic in this film from that point forward. I think mentally we think, oh yeah, he's dark, he's stoic. That comes more from Batman v Superman, in which he says lines like this one.
The bat is dead. Bury it. Consider this mercy.
That is a dark and stoic, more cryptic Superman. The version of this movie isn't. He actually is hopeful. And I love from his point of view when he interacts with Zod, he's trying to save the day, he's saving everyone, and then he talks to Jor-El again. Like, it's really well done overall. And the way the movie ends, the note it ends on with him destroying the satellite, crashing, and just talking to the general, he has a lighter tone. I think that also reflects his entire story arc. It's like he knows why he's here. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. So there's joy in that. And then also him choosing to become the Metropolis Clark Kent so he can have a relationship with Lois Lane. It's all well done, honestly. He's riding on his bike and stuff. We get this. It ends with us seeing him as that version of Clark Kent introduce himself to Lois Lane. It's really well done. Those things are really, really well done, in my opinion. So I think Man of Steel is not the problem with Snyder's version of Superman. I feel like he was the writer of the movie, had a vision that I've outlined for you. That he wanted us to be introduced to a very isolated Clark Kent. As he discovers his purpose, he finds joy in that. What I think should have come next, and perhaps would have come next if we were given a proper sequel to Man of Steel, is just seeing him as Superman, to see the joy that he could experience as Superman, saving the day, helping people. Much of what you see in the new Superman film, I think, could have been done with this version. It wasn't ruined. Again, problematic elements of Man of Steel, it wasn't ruined at that point. We still had a decent character arc and a good ending point. But from that point forward, I feel like with Zack Snyder, I don't think Goyer was involved. Zack Snyder chose to focus on is the tough, dark, cryptic version of Superman. That's like a powerhouse force of nature, as opposed to the person, the character that we had seen develop from the first movie. I don't feel like he's really present in the second movie in Batman vs Superman. I mean, yes, he's there, but he says hardly anything. We don't get much of his character anymore, in my opinion, at least. Much of his character, and he seems very hardened in that reason. It doesn't make sense to me, especially after the beautiful character he had in Man of Steel.
And number one, it's absolute visual spectacle. Now, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. Start out, the beautiful scenes in Krypton were just epic. They were amazing, beautiful. It never veers into the realm of the goofy, fantastical parts, which you may see a little bit that in some of the newer superhero type movies. It stays firmly grounded and yet spectacular. The best scene, in my personal opinion, is the sequence when he fights Feora and then also the other enforcer, Kryptonian enforcer. It's just visually amazing. And the thing is, like, we're talking about this movie came out in 2013, and it still rivals anything that's been produced since then. And I put the new Superman movie right there with it. I love the new Superman movie, don't get me wrong, it was fantastic. However, I would say because of the grounded nature of it, the fight scenes in Man of Steel were more impactful because they were so grounded. It did feel real. It felt like they brought like if you took Dragon Ball Z in terms of the power ups, the intense battles, and put that into a realistic superhero film, you would get Man of Steel. And so, just visual spectacle. The flight scenes, for example, they still have not never topped these flight scenes to me because it has the epicness that you expect, but there's also a majestic nature to it as well. And so you really feel from the music to the visuals, like when he's flying, especially the first time, it's moving. And so it's just a beautiful film, honestly. And we're talking back in 2013. So they had some good Marvel films at the time. Don't get me wrong, some great stuff was going on, but we had never seen Superman portrayed this way. Yes, we love the Christopher Reeve movies; they're classic. The Brandon Routh film was good, but this movie kind of took some of those best elements from those previous versions and then gave us a truly epic visual spectacle of Superman. The final fight was Zod. I think it was really impressive. It goes on a little too long. I feel like it just kind of kept going. And so with those type of fights, I think sometimes the smaller the better. But overall, absolute visual spectacle. Beautiful film, beautiful visuals. Again, it's like that elevated nature of it's not oversaturated. It has that undersaturated visual that Zack Snyder is known for, but that also did lend to the grounded nature of the film. We're not supposed to be in a fantastical world of all this crazy things happening. It's our world with this one spectacular element placed in, which is Superman, and there's an alien invasion. So it has very sci-fi feel to it, but the visuals are absolutely amazing. Feora, especially, she has another sequence where she just fights a bunch of military personnel, and it's super speed done in a way in which we haven't really seen before. It feels like it came straight out of an anime. It's just visually amazing. So if that's something that you're interested in, this movie delivers in spades. Those are my top 5 reasons you need to revisit Man of Steel, because I promise you, it's not as bad as you think. Until next time, stay enthusiastically optimistic. This is Steven signing off.